Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Social Zee Franchise Happy Hour. I'm the host, as always, coming from the luckiest little fishing village, Destin, Florida. Very cloudy and gloomy today, but I'm sure it'll be sunny tomorrow. And I'm excited to get to talk to Mr. Steve today, who, in my opinion, is probably the best-looking guest we've had on our podcast here so far. So, Steve, how are you?
I'm doing great, Calvin. Thank you so much for having me on the show today. It's good to see you finally after I think we tried this about a year ago and we finally got here. So it took a little while, but happy to be with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for jumping on. And Steve, so Austin is it the city of the Violet Crown? What is Austin's nickname? And I've heard the Bat City. There's another one too, right?
Yeah, it's the live music capital of the world.
That's it. Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. So Steve's in Austin, and Steve, you were telling me before we jumped on, you've been out there about 19 years. Is that right?
Yeah, it's hard to believe. We've lived here in the Austin area for 19 years now. Yeah, and Atlanta for 15 or so before that. So, two great cities.
Well, to kick us off, Steve, we'll ask you to do what we ask everyone to do: is just give us your 60, 120 second kind of background, where you are, what you're doing, and then we'll, of course, we'll want to dive in and learn more about your journey.
Sure, sounds great. So thanks again for having me on. So my background and my kind of long and winding road to franchising is interesting, as all of them are. But going way back, I was born and raised in a military family. We moved a bunch, and I remember wanting to own a business from the time that I was like 5 years old, right? And so, we've through the years as I grew up and kind of started my career, I jumped into the high tech industry, kind of put aside the starting a business idea for a while. Had an amazing, fun career in with some very large high tech companies, some fun jobs. I had great people that I worked for. But sometime along this path, in about 2006, I started thinking, I don't want to do this forever. I don't want to work for somebody else forever and rely on them and have them get all the benefit of the work that I do. So I started to get the itch to really look around in earnest and kind of try to find a business to buy, is how I started this journey. Sure. And I had at one point a business broker say, hey, there's a great kids haircut place that's for sale that you might be interested in. I had developed this whole checklist of I want this business to have, these 12 criteria. And so I looked at that, but it wasn't for me. But it did turn me on to the hair space, the hair salon space. Yeah. And so I'm a Great Clips franchisee. I started in 2007, so 16 years ago. That little bug that somebody put in my ear about, hey, look at this kid's hair salon, turned into me exploring with multiple concepts. I ended with Great Clips because for me personally, that was the right fit at the right time. And I thought, I'll keep my job and do this for a couple years and then I'll quit and do the franchise thing full time. And that turned into 10 years, right? I stayed employed full time 10 years, and looking back, obviously 2020, hindsight's 2020, but I should have left much sooner because I could have grown much faster. Sure. But I was having fun along the way and didn't quite want to leave. But I made the jump finally completely out of the corporate world and into running Great Clip salons full time back in 2016. So,
wow. Yeah. Steve, I'm curious. So you mentioned you grew up in a military family. How did you end up going to Auburn? What had you land there?
Yeah, good question. So I was born in Fort Benning, Georgia, near Columbus, Georgia. Right, my dad was in the Army. And so we had grandparents around that area, and that was kind of a home base for me because we moved all the time, right? Anybody that's familiar with the military life knows you move quite a bit, and so Auburn happened to be very close to Fort Benning. It's 45 minutes away. I was touring some colleges as I was getting ready to figure out what I wanted to do, and I went there, and it just clicked and felt like that was the right place for me to be, and met my future wife there and had a good time, and so that was a good choice.
Awesome. And you're at Auburn, and you mentioned earlier that you ended up in the tech space kind of back before it was the cool thing to do, right? And so how did you end up in, I'm assuming Auburn wasn't the tech savvy,
Right. Yeah.
So
I got a marketing degree, and I took a couple computer programming classes my senior year, and I was like, computers seem kind of cool. And I ended up getting a job with a little computer reseller, and that kind of led me on a journey to bigger and better things.
Sure.
That eventually kind of set me up in a funny way just to be here doing what I'm doing now, right? So that's what brought me to Austin in the first place, and and I'm glad I connected with Great Clips and kind of started that journey, and convinced my wife to come along with me. So she's an integral part of our business. Also, we're business partners in addition to spouses.
Good. And so were you at Dell whenever you started with
I was. Yeah, I ended up working at Dell for almost 20 years. So I was there when we lived in Atlanta, and then moved to Austin with them. So had a really good career with them.
Sure. So you mentioned something earlier, Stephen. This is something that I've been talking more and more about over the last number of episodes, as I learn more about it, but entrepreneurship through acquisition or buying a business versus starting a business, right? There's a lot of I guess popularity or excitement around the startup world, but the more and more that I learn, it seems like the better path to entrepreneurship for a lot of people is through the acquisition route. And so, what made you decide to start there, and what kind of got you excited about that?
Yeah, so great question. So we have right now, we operate 14 units, and we're in expansion mode, right? We're considering some large acquisitions and just some organic onesie-twosie additions to our business. But we first got into this, and we signed the franchise agreement on the dotted line, and we're like, oh crap, now we've done it. We got to figure out what we're doing. And so we agreed when we signed up, we agreed to open 3 new locations within a couple years, and we got a break on our franchise agreement fees or something. So, but before we were able to build the first one, we bought an existing location so we could kind of figure it out, and we ended up turning that around. It's worked out to be an amazing unit for us and doing really well. But through the years, we've acquired half of our salons, and we've built half of our salons. So there are definitely pros and cons to both sides of that one, right? So I'm a fan of both, and like I said earlier, we're looking to expand via acquisition, in addition to building a couple right now also.
That's interesting. And I'm assuming, all the businesses I've done, Steve, have been, from the ground up, and I'm very interested in the acquisition space right now.
Yeah.
What do you think are the biggest, differences, pros and cons between the two? And, if you were to go back 16 years now, you mentioned that you would have maybe left Dell a little bit sooner, but what would you have done differently over that time?
Well, I think the biggest thing is I would have been able to accelerate our growth earlier on. Right. So my time was very limited. And so I had I was working all my spare time to build the business while I was still holding on a full-time job. So just leaving that, it's a hard decision for anybody to make, to leave a secure, well-paying job with great people and benefits and just jump out on your own. It's terrifying for a lot of people. But what I missed by sticking around too long was accelerating that growth earlier. Right, so we could have acquired more stores earlier, or built more stores earlier, or built our organization stronger and earlier. So there's, that's the cons of me staying in place a little too long, probably. But it's worked out really well, and I'm grateful for what we've been able to do. But looking back again, I could have exited that job faster and grown this faster, and maybe been a little further down the field at this point.
Sure. And you mentioned when you signed on to open a number of them, and then you ended up, before you opened those, you ended up buying one. So how did that come about, and what made you interested in doing that? Because I'm sure you were already stressed and feeling the pressure these new ones opened, right? So
I was freaking out, right? So we our first salon that we committed to, that we signed a lease for and committed to build, was 45 miles from our house. So I was like, all right, we must be crazy, but 45 miles from the house, building a new location, learning a new business, going through all the things for the first time that go along with that. But while we were working through that, I heard there was a guy in town who had one unit, and he was, it was a interesting looking place. The demographics looked good. The location looked a little physically worn down, but in good shape. And so we went out and looked at it and decided that the everything about the unit looked great except for the guy that was running it. so I worked with him and bought it quickly, and we were able to do a complete turnaround, replace the entire staff, physically fix it up, make the place look better, look brighter, and start to build a team. And it worked out well. That's been a great salon for us for 16 years now.
Sure. And then you mentioned, now that you're at 14, about to expand to more. You said you've acquired some and you've started some. Yeah. What when you're in this expansion mode, Steve, what are you looking at that drives that decision? Is it really just the market? What are you looking at to say, hey, we're going to go buy these, or hey, we're going to go open one here?
Yeah. So there's a couple. For me now, it's very strategic. We're thinking about, where do we want to invest the money to add a location, because it's expensive, right? Construction costs are through the roof in the past few years. Materials are delayed and expensive, and so it's a big decision to build right now. And so for us, there are specific places that we're looking geographically to expand and add units, and so we'll do those through new builds. But there's also, we've built an organization from the ground up that enables us to grow faster. So we have a good team of senior managers and general managers that run operations for a lot of our locations, and having that stability and that level of leadership in your organization lets you springboard off of it and grow faster. Because if you've got good talent and you're developing that talent and lifting them up, that lets you do bigger things and focus on more strategic things, like acquiring other units and building other units and growing your business.
Yeah, I'd like to dive into that a little bit more, Steve. So, you started this. You mentioned, your wife's your partner in the business.
Yep.
I'm assuming it was, the first units was probably just you two, right? And so,
yeah.
What's the journey from, you and your wife and starting a couple, you bought one, like what was the path to get from there to now you've got this, what it sounds like is like a, corporate management team that helps you oversee all of them and the growth. Like, how do you get from A to Z?
Yeah, so great question. We started, we're like, we know nothing about hair or the beauty industry, but my wife and I have very complementary skills. She's the brains of the operation, so she's our back office, payroll, HR. She was a CPA, and I'm more sales, marketing, operations, real estate, legal, things like that. But we knew when we got into this, we had to be hands-on so we could learn the business from the ground up, right? And it was a massive learning curve, a lot of time invested to try to learn the business, take advantage of all that we could get from our franchisor to help us scale. But we knew that we needed to be on the lookout for managers and general managers who could join us and scale. And we really honestly invested very early when we found a person with brand knowledge who clicked with us and had the similar values that we wanted in our company. And so we invested very early and put what would later become a general manager in place to help us grow. And then from that, Calvin, we just we look for talent inside of our company and try to keep those people challenged and growing. So there are future leaders, and they help us grow the business and help us run the business. And those people are integral to our success and ability to continue to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, obviously, we talk to franchisees on here all the time, and it's our network. But you mentioned you heard and you were talking about particularly a children's hair opportunity.
Yeah.
Somewhere down the road, you ended up with Great Clips.
Yeah.
What was it about Great Clips specifically where you said, hey, this is what I'm going to take the leap, I'm going to invest in? And did you look at other brands, or how did you end up on that specific?
I did. So yeah, I looked at at several other brands, seriously looked at them and investigated and went down the path. And, I was quick to rule out some other industries, like for me, that just weren't the right fit. And once I realized that this sector really checked all the boxes of what I was personally looking for in a business, I went deep with several different brands. And really, they were all good. They all had similar success metrics at the time, and they were all growing and all eager to get franchisees signed on, and a lot of similarities. But to me, there were really just there were three that I seriously looked at. I ended up with Great Clips mainly because there was a track record in place that was good. The franchisees that I talked to during the due diligence, I was able to connect with and really resonated with the stories that they had and the information that they were able to share with me. But really, at the end of the day, it turned out for me to be, the financials looked good, looked like I had the right opportunity. It was a mature system, and then the senior executive team that I met with really is what made me sign, right? Because you either have a personal connection or you don't. You can figure that out pretty quickly. And some of the people I talked to at other concepts were not. There was no connection there whatsoever. But the executive team that I met with back when I was going through due diligence 16 years ago now, it just felt right. It's hard to say, but you get this gut feeling when something's what you're looking for, and that's what I experienced there. So that was it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I've been talking about recently with some of my peer groups, Steve, is as we go on this roller coaster of entrepreneurship,
Mm-hmm.
there's highs and there's lows.
Yeah.
And obviously you've been on a really cool journey because you had a career and you were doing this on the side, so that was probably a different dynamic. And then I'm sure you had other things, but when you look back at it, where do you feel like you were the most excited about the business? And also like to hear your thoughts on was there ever a time when you're like, man, this was a big mistake?
Yeah. Those are really good questions, right? And so there's the first few years were very difficult, right? So you're learning so much, and you may think you know a lot when you start, but you realize how little you really know when you really start to jump into a business, right? Yep. So it's just massive learning the first few years, and it's just we were a sponge, just listening to anybody we could talk to try to glean some little nugget that would help us succeed. And so we really worked our tails off the first few years in figuring out I didn't know how to build a salon, how to build a business, or how to review a lease or any of that stuff. And so huge learnings the first few years. But then after a while, after 3 or 4 years, we had I think 4 locations, and we decided we wanted to buy a group of 3 salons. And so at that point, so it was 3 or 4 years, we were like, what, I feel like we know enough to know what we're doing to be able to make this move. And so 3 or 4 years of intense learning curve for us put us in a position where we felt comfortable. We felt like we knew enough to go do this, and we made an acquisition that almost doubled the size of our company back then. Awesome. So that was kind of when we knew, I think we know what we're doing. I think we can work our way through this, and with the help of the network that we had built internal to Great Clips franchisees and external, we were able to make it work and have the confidence to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there were definitely though moments when, and specifically in the last 3 years, where we're like, what in the world are we doing? Right? That was just. I hate to look back in the rearview mirror at this point a few years, but that was the moment when we were like, man, what have we done? Because we're in a people-heavy, bricks and mortar concept that was, shut down just like everybody else. But that was really the moment. There's like, wow, what should we really be doing this? And what have we got ourselves into? But thank goodness we were able to move past that, survive it, and and look forward again. So we're looking forward for our, what's next in our strategy, just to continue to grow our organization.
Sure. It's interesting, Steve. You mentioned, obviously the last few years were weird for everyone, but you started in 2006 when it wasn't a great economic environment.
Right.
Certainly after that, so you've been through 2 recessions and
yes,
the the pandemic, and so
Yep.
What do you think it's been the difference between your business? Obviously you've grown, you've expanded during this time, and I would guess that there was probably some great Clips franchisees, or at least other people in your space that didn't make it, right? So what do you think are the key things that helped you kind of thrive through those times when others maybe didn't?
Honestly, I think, Calvin, it's a lot of it has to do with every individual reacts differently to what's presented to them, and so we all experience the terror, right, of having our businesses shut down and go to zero. And in a people heavy, real estate heavy business, that's terrifying, because there's zero coming in and you still have big checks to write going out. And so that was a tough time. It was a very tough time. And what got us through some of that was some of it's personal, right? Our personal DNA is to fight and learn and aggressively try to gather information. And we did an awful lot of that in 2020. It's like, what can we do? What programs are out there?
Right.
Who can we talk to just to bitch and moan a little bit, and also to lean on for some advice. And so our network of franchisees that we know and franchisor was pretty engaged. That helped us a lot get through. But really, a lot of that, it was just a very, very stressful time for everybody, right? A lot of lost sleep, a lot of worry, and but we made it through, and so that's good. And in going out of that, in the midst of it, we were expanding, right? Some of it we had no choice because we had leases that we had signed and we had to keep moving on. We ended up opening or buying 4 units during kind of 2020 to 2021.
Wow.
And so that was another roller coaster ride. But like I said, we had signed leases and buildings that were delivered, and we had to move forward. And so, on top of everything else, I kept referring back to this quote from Warren Buffett that says, "When others are greedy, be fearful, and when others are fearful, be greedy." And so I was like, well, you know what? We're going all in, and we'll see what happens. And we made it through. So
awesome.
Still have a lot of work to do to develop some of those places, but we're here.
Sure. Steve, before we run out of time, I do want to talk about the dynamic, for you personally. Obviously, there's a lot of us that have got into this space, and with the support of our partners with our spouses, and obviously you're in that boat. So, what's that been like on a personal journey with working with your spouse, and what have you learned from it, and any advice out there for anyone that's thinking about doing it?
Yeah. So there's definitely some interesting dynamics when you work with your spouse, right? And so it's a blessing and a curse depending on the day. And so, we'll get in each other's hair every once in a while, but we have very complementary skills, and we've got our lanes that we try to stay in our own lanes, right? And not get in each other's way. But having that kind of clearly defined roles is important. And then it's you got to find a way to stop talking about it at the close of business, right? Absolutely. Somebody once said to me, and I love this, Calvin, somebody once said, "Don't let the spreadsheets get into the bed sheets."
That's perfect. I love it.
Right? So that's always stuck with me. I was like, that's beautiful. So turn off the work talk so you can focus on your relationship and keep that healthy, because it's really easy to just be entirely consumed by what we do, because as a business owner, you're very passionate about your business, right? And so it's very difficult sometimes to just shut that off, or to even realize how much you talk about it. So you have to be very deliberate and intentional about taking time away, talking about other things and realizing that if somebody's talking about work at the wrong time, you got to say, cut it off, stop, right?
Absolutely.
To save the relationship. So
that's great. I'm gonna go home and tell my wife that.
There you go. Yeah.
Get some brownie points. Absolutely. Steve, what are you spending your time on now? Obviously, you're not, I'm assuming, in the day-to-day of the stores anymore. You're focused on higher level things. Like what's your day-to-day like now? And on to follow up on that, what is your focus out? You mentioned the expansion. What's your main focus and your goal for 2023?
Yeah. So great questions to kind of wind us down. So I'll tell you what, right now we're blessed to have our daughter, who's 25 years old, has decided to come work with us, and she wants to learn the business. So she's been with us for, I think, about 8 months now. And so she is working through the process of learning the business with the intention of continuing on. So she's taken over running payroll for us from my wife to relieve some of her. And she's doing a bunch of stuff to try to ramp in. But, helping her ramp into the business and trying to have the patience to realize that I've been doing this for 16 years and somebody coming in cold does not know what I know. Absolutely. That's a big focus for us, is to help get her ramped to where she can be very successful with this long term if she chooses to do that. The other things that are on the agenda for me this year, I mentioned we're looking to expand, and so we're considering some kind of sizable acquisitions that would be put us a little outside of our comfort zone, but we're looking at it and trying to expand our business that way and think strategically. And my day-to-day really is, I'm in our salons. I want to know every person that works for us and have a relationship with them. So we make a point out of creating a reason to go visit our locations. All of us do. I do some of the maintenance still. I find a reason to go talk to people and be engaged. But a lot of what I do is really about strategy and communicating with our teams so that we can try to keep everybody rowing in the same direction and keep everybody happy. And then outside of that, I've really been working hard over the past year, and will continue to do that this year, to grow my network outside of the Great Clips family, right? Sure. And so to engage more with activities and conferences and lobbying efforts at the state and federal level, just to get me out with other franchisees from different brands, to give me more perspective on this big world that we all work in. Sure. Are you doing that through the IFA, or where are you spending your time? So yeah, both. I went last year for the first time to DC with the IFA. I had a blast, and I'm bringing my wife out this year this fall to do it again. So sure. It's a really neat way to kind of educate lawmakers on small business and franchising and some of the issues that are unique to us and important to us. Yep. So we're doing that federally, and then at the state level, next week for the first time, I'm working with the NFIB, the National Federation of Independent Businesses. And we're doing the same thing at a state level with the Texas legislature next week to do some one-day kind of lobbying and education for our local and state representatives. So that's new to me, and so far it's been a lot of fun and something pretty cool and new. Awesome. Well, Steve, we appreciate your time. It's been a pleasure getting to talk to you. We're gonna respect your time and wrap it up here. But right. Last thing I'll ask you to do is, if anyone wants to talk to you, connect with you, whether it's a customer, a future employee, or just anyone in that network, what's the best way to get a hold of you and reach out to you? It's probably through LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Steve Bixler, Great Clips, and you'll probably find me pretty quickly that way. But happy to connect and expand the network that way. Absolutely. Well, Steve, thanks again. We appreciate it. Well, hopefully we get to talk to you again as we continue on this podcast journey, and look forward to seeing your expansion. Anyone who took the time to listen to me and Steve talk tonight, we really appreciate it. Hope you join us on the next episode of the Social Zee. Thanks. Thanks so much for having me.